Okay, I'm going to just start because some people have class that need to get to go to. So if everyone could either get your pizza and then have a seat, that would be great. All right, so we're talking about interview strategies. And this is U.S. interview strategies. So as we were discussing, it depends on who your interviewer is going to be. So if you're going to ISIP, your interviewer, if you're interviewing for a position in Brussels or in Japan, the interview style is going to be whatever interview style it is in that country. I'm going over U.S. interview styles that usually occur in a 20-minute interview, which is what the ISIP interview is going to be. But just take that with a grain of salt, because if your interviewer is not a U.S.-based person, it could be more more tailored to whatever country you're coming from. So, the big picture. Just you need to remember that an interview is not an inquisition. Please go into it knowing that this is a conversation. It is an opportunity for the employer to learn about you, and it is really a give and take for you to learn about the employer, because you want to work for someone that you really would like to work for, and it resonates with both of you. So please go into the interview with that type of confidence and knowledge that this is a two-way street. What the employer is looking for. They want something that's going to set you apart from all the other candidates. You're competing with a lot of other students. What is it about you in particular that is different? And you need to sit down, look at your resume, and think about what makes you stand out from everybody else. Interest and enthusiasm. You only have 20 minutes. You need to go into that interview showing that you want this particular job. Don't waffle. You need to go in there confident. This is why I want this job. This is why I'm good for this job, and express that to them. Yes?
Talking about like a particular position, when we do the ISIP thing, we only apply for a particular office, but we don't really see the department or the section that they...
Yes, which is hard. So if it is like an ISIP interview and it's a very broad one, many times at ISIP, the interviewer will tell you a little bit more when you get there. We're interviewing for this particular type of position in the firm. Sometimes they tell you then. Then if it's sort of a broader, then you go into the firm. If you have a background in litigation, or if you have a background in transactional law, why would you be a good fit for that firm as a whole? Most of the time they've picked you for the ISIP interviews because of your skill sets, your knowledge in the country that you're coming from. So you want to weave that into your narrative, but you do have to listen to cues from the employer, especially if you don't really know what the position is. Motivation. What is your motivation for getting a job with them? What are you trying to gain from this position? Knowledge of a certain area, an expertise. That's what they're looking for, and also your knowledge about them as a employer. They're also looking for your maturity, your poise, and your judgment. So some of the questions may be more tailored to find out if you have these characteristics that they want as an employee. They would like to have a attorney that could relate to their clients. So they don't want necessarily someone that they could put in front of their clients. So that's what they're looking for. Verbal, nonverbal communication skills. In the U.S., you go into an interview, you look the person in the eye, you shake their hand. That is that's a nonverbal communication skill that they're going to be looking for. They do want to have eye-to-eye contact. U.S. employers do, so you have to do that. Handshakes, strong handshake, not bone crushing, not weak, but that is something that they're also looking for. Whether you could fit in. Every employer wants to know if you're going to be a good fit for their office. Will you fit in with the other attorneys? Are you someone they want to have a cup of coffee with? Are you someone they want to work long hours with? This is what they're evaluating to see if you are that type of person. So you just have to be charming, which you are. Prepare. How to prepare for these interviews. Research the organization before you get there. The websites, newspaper articles, blogs, trade. Lexic and Westlaw has good information on most of the firms. If you have the opportunity to talk to people who've worked there before, whether they've interned there, that is a good way of going about. With people that have worked there before, you all have access to the alumni directory. You could see if there are people at that firm. If you go to the firm's website, You could search by school. You could search and see if there's any University of Pennsylvania alumni there. You can reach out to them before the actual interview. You also can see if there's any JDs that have worked at that firm as an intern. We have lists of that on the website as well, and you could reach out to them to see how their experience was. It will be different than yours, but it is also another insight to the firm. If you have the interviewer's name, and sometimes you don't get this till the last minute, you want to research the interviewer. You want to just pull up their particular background, know what their practice area is. Another thing is, what are they interested in? Are there any charitable boards? So you have an idea of who they are before you get into the interview. Sometimes it's an issue with ISIP interviews or any of those type of large interview programs that you don't know who the interviewer is until maybe the day before, and actually when you show up that day, it may have changed. Everyone has busy schedules, things happen. So I do advise you when you get to ISIP, or your whichever interview you're going to, but I'm talking about ISIP at this point, go check to see by each door, they will have a name of the interviewer printed on a sheet of paper next to the door. It may change, and lots of times the administration will just cross out the name and put the new name. It is important for you to go and look to see if it's a different interviewer, or else you may get thrown. Another way to prepare, you need to know your resume and research yourself. A lot of times I have conversations with students with mock interviews, and I point to something on their resume, and they're like, well, gosh, that was 5 years ago. I really don't really know what I wrote on that thesis. You need to know it for your interview. Anything on your resume is fair game. So you can't have the excuse of saying, well, it was so long, I don't really remember the type of work I did back then. You need to know it for that interview, and you need to be able to articulate that in a very short, crisp way. If you had to submit a writing sample, reread it, because they may have read it. Your transcript, know your grades. They may ask, like, why did you receive a C in this class? You need to be able to address that. Extra copies of all documents. At ISIP, they will not have a photocopy machine there, or at least it's not one accessible for you guys. So bring extra copies of all your documents. You should bring, for each employer that you're going to have an interview with, a copy of your resume, have a writing sample if they ask for it, bring a copy of your transcript. Doesn't have to be official, but once you get your transcript, and hopefully you're going to get all your grades by the 22nd of this month, just download it from Pen Touch. Copy that onto a Word document, include your name, your header, and bring that to the interviews as well. Reference list. Occasionally they would like a list of references. This usually is later in the process, but a reference list is just a list of 3 names of people that you have either had a class with or someone that you worked with. They would want the name of the person, the title, where they work, and how to contact them. As a courtesy, if you're providing a reference list, make sure you reach out to your reference, let them know you've included them, I've had students who have not done that, and give them an updated version of your resume. So if they do get a call, they know everything that's pertinent about you at this time, which may have changed since you started Penn. So what to bring to your interview, resume, and or CV. If you're interviewing with a firm from your country or another country, they may want a CV version, have it with you. So your transcript, writing sample. If you have publications, nice to have as well. And anything else the employer requested. Sometimes with employers they say, please bring something else, just have that with you. You have a question? No, you can go first.
When you say references, do the references have to be your friend or can
No.
they come from our
They could be from your law school, they could be an employer that you worked with before. Your Penn professors, until you have the grade from them, they usually will not agree to be a reference. So once you get your grades, you got a good grade in the class, you could always go and ask that particular professor if they'll be a reference for you. But usually until they have that, they're not willing to be a reference. And it's only a reference, it's not a letter of recommendation. It's just a reference saying, I've worked with, it's someone that either you worked with, a former boss, a former professor, someone that knows your work. And don't worry if you don't have a reference list at this point. Most employers are not going to be asking for this at ISIP. They may be asking this after your second interview, possibly at your third interview, because ISIP is only a screening process. After ISIP is a second interview, usually that is a longer interview that is 3 hours long, at least the ones in the United States are. So by that time, if they ask you for a reference list, you will have time to prepare one. So do not worry. Yes.
Try to be in a position of having an American one, or does that not necessarily matter?
I think once you get your grades, if you did well in a class or if you resonate very well with somebody at the law school, sure, you should start setting that up because you're going to want them eventually.
No, my question is if it looks bad if I give one without an American.
No, it will not look bad. They know that you've only had, or have only been here for one semester, and they know that professors are not going to write or agree to be references until they've seen your grades. And most of the employers know that you're not going to get those grades until the end of January. Yes.
Where and when do we find out? What does a particular employer want us to bring to the interview?
When will you find out what if there's any particular?
When or where do we find it out?
If on the ISIP actual, when you applied, or when you get your list, usually it's when you get your list of who you're interviewing with, they may have a notation saying, I would like you to bring this, anything special. For any interviewer, any time, you always should have a copy of your resume, a transcript, your writing sample, and a list of references, eventually, because they may ask for it. So you do not want to be unprepared. You always should have that. So if you have 18, or you've got 11 interviews that day, have a manila folder for each particular employer with that set of materials. And have that very nicely organized so that when you have your interview, you could give it to them. You just don't want to be caught surprised at the fact if they ask you. They will have your resume. I mean, ISA provides you the resume, but sometimes employers ask you anyways to see if you're prepared. So you want to just have those materials and you'll be good to go. Okay, so the first 7 seconds of an interview are important. So you want to be punctual. With ISIP, you don't have much time in between interviews, so just letting you know, you may have 5 minutes to get from one interview to another interview, and there's 3 different floors, so you'll be running a bit. If this is the case, the employers know. You just will have to front it when you get to your next employer if you're a little bit late, just saying, I'm so sorry, I had an interview on the 3rd floor and I only need to get to the 7th floor, that's why I'm a little bit late. With ISIP, it is very regulated. There's going to be someone, and maybe me, standing at the door saying, it is now 10 o'clock, you may enter your interview. At the 20-minute point, I will be opening up the door saying, interviews are ended. Everyone please leave the room for the next group to come in. So it's very much regulated for the 20 minutes at ISIP. So you don't have to worry too much that you're going to be very late. We will let you know it is time to wrap up, everyone has to leave. And if an employer that you're with is sort of constantly talking to you, you just have to let them know, I have another interview on the 7th floor, I have to leave. Thank you so very much, I have your card. So you just sort of be proactive both ways, but don't worry, at that particular ISIP, we will be keeping you guys on track. Dress professionally. I don't have any problems with the LLMs. You guys always dress very nicely, but usually you should be wearing a suit. It should be your choice, whether it is a skirt suit or a pantsuit for the women, but definitely matching suit, jacket, and either skirt or pants. That's what they will be expecting you to have is a regular suit. Walk in with confidence, not arrogance. There's that fine line. You guys know what it is. Avoid the limp handshakes, good eye contact, and smile. I mean, you definitely want to go in with a good attitude that this is a give and take. Lots of times people get so nervous, they're not thinking about being engaging to the employer. These employers will be there for many, many hours, and you're going to be one of possibly 18 interviewees that they're seeing that day, back to back to back every 20 minutes. So you need to bring that energy into the room because they may not have it after the first 4 hours. So just remember, keep up and also control your hands. I have a problem doing that, but in interviews you should be controlling your hands and not talking with them flailing. Okay, feet on the ground, across the ankles, if you want. So, some tips for non-native English speakers. Interviews are usually used to assess the candidate's command of spoken English. Do not worry so much if you're not speaking English perfectly. It is more important just to be able to communicate effectively. Take your time. Listen to the question that is posed to you, and then answer. Take your time. It's okay to take a moment before speaking. If you do not understand the question or the nature of the question, ask for clarification. That's okay. I mean, it could be that they asked it in a way that just was, you didn't really know what the point of it is. Take the time to say, can you please repeat the question, or can you clarify that? That's fine, and just take your time. They're really just trying to find out a bit more about you. Tips on appearance, well-tailored Western style business suit. Dark suits are preferred, doesn't really matter that much. Avoid flashy colors, patterns, or jewelry. Shoes should be polished. Tie is required for men. No strong cologne or perfume. I'm telling this to everybody. And it's more important than the clothes themselves. It's how comfortable you are. I mean, a lot of times female attorneys come to me and say, should I wear a skirt? Will they expect that? Do I have to wear heels? You don't have to wear anything except something that's professional, and it has to be that you're comfortable in it. I'd rather someone wear whatever they're comfortable in than feeling they have to wear a certain look. I do get many comments about that. That's why I brought this up. So just be sure that you're comfortable with what you're wearing. Small talk. At least in the US, they like to break the ice about talking small talk. That's why there's that interest section on your resume. They want to get to know you a bit more. So the small talk can start with, even though it's 20 minutes, they may ask you about the weather. They want to establish rapport with you. So don't feel compelled to immediately start into your interview without having a little bit of the niceties ahead of time, which would be the small talk. So don't rush them. You just sort of have to ease into it. You want the interviewer to like you. So you're going to be establishing that rapport. So many times they start with that interest section. Say, oh my gosh, I see that you play tennis. I play tennis. Or I play golf. You play golf. So those type of things that may seem very why is this on my resume? This is not relevant at all. It is to establish that rapport with the person, and that's why they have it on there. Some of the questions that usually they will ask, why do you want to work for our organization? Very brief. Why do you want to work for the organization? Tell me about yourself. If they ask this broad question about tell me about yourself, what they're looking for is your education and your experience and how that education experience will help the firm or the organization. They're not really asking about your personal life. They're asking more about education experience and how you will fit with their firm. So that's the type of answer that you would have to have. What is your greatest strength or weakness? Greatest strength, something related to how you are a fine attorney, your analytical abilities, your writing skills, your research, your knowledge of an area. Weaknesses, nothing too intense, please. I mean, do not feel this is a time to really tell them about that problem that you have. It's more of a weakness of that is fixable or something that you're working on. If it is a language issue, if English is not your native tongue, you may say, my weakness I feel is my command of the English language. I'm working on it this way. It has improved greatly this year since I've been here, but I'm constantly trying to improve it. That is a weakness that really, really isn't a weakness, but that's a fine answer for most LLMs. Other weaknesses may be, I am a type A personality. I want to do everything myself. I have a hard time delegating, and I'm working on that. So those are the type of weaknesses that are something that's not really going to hurt you. Telling someone that, and I've had people tell this to me in mock interviews, that I have problems meeting deadlines. Bad weakness. Do not share that. I mean, or anything that's a bit more personal than that. Don't share those. Your greatest accomplishment. This can be your greatest accomplishment personally or professionally. So just think of something that made you yourself very proud. Why did you get an LLM? They're all going to want to know that. Why did you pick Penn? Is it the size of the firm, the size of the school? If you're trying to work for a firm that's a little bit smaller, You could do a comparison. I like the intimacy of Penn Law, the smaller size, the contact. I'm looking for that also in a firm. I mean, you could relate both of those. Has law school met your expectations? We're just going to be curious about how you felt this experience has been this year. What do you see yourself doing in 5 or 10 years from now? If this is an employer that is hiring you for a full-time position, what do you see yourself doing in 5 years at their firm? Please do not tell them that in 5 years you want to be in-house counsel for another place. That has happened in interviews. So if it is a internship that is, or a law position that's only for 1 year, of course you could say what your 5-year plans are. But if it is for a position at their firm for 5 years, or may likely be that, what do you want to be at their firm? More things that they might be asking about. What are you looking for in an employer? This is something you have to have some self-reflection about before you walk into that interview. How do you handle stress? Do you run for, do you go for a run to handle stress? They're just trying to figure out if you're going to be able to handle the type of job. If you've already worked at a large firm or a similar type of environment, you could say, done it before, handle it well, this is how I handle my stress. If you have not, if you're straight out of school and they don't know how you're going to handle that stress, that's why you want to sort of think about what do you do now to sort of relieve the stress of being at law school. Behavioral questions. This is something sort of newer that some of the firms are doing. They may not do it in the 20-minute interview, but in the 3-hour interview, you may see some of those. Describe a situation in which you were able to use persuasion to convince a person to approach things your way. So they're trying to have you pick times that you've done something and how you resolved an issue. Describe a situation in which you had very little time and few resources to accomplish a task. These type of behavioral questions you have to think about ahead of time because it's not something you can think of at the spur of the moment. We have a whole list of them on the website, so please just review them and think through scenarios that could fit. One scenario could fit for probably several of these type of behavioral questions, but you have to think about them before you start. Best answer is stick with the truth. I mean, that's definite what you need to do. Tell a story. You're lawyers, you know, stories sort of personalize things. Show genuine commitment and passion for that firm, for that area of law. Also, of course, try and show the interviewer what you could add value to their particular firm. It is a mistake to focus only on how you will benefit from them. Many attorneys, especially more law students that are fresh out of school or currently in school, have a problem of going into interviews and just saying, I want to work for your organization because you're going to teach me this and this and this and this, and it's all about what the organization could do for them, and they don't ever say what you could offer the actual organization. And you have a lot to offer them. You're smart, well-reasoned people who have some experience and have the know-how and the will to want to get more experience. So whatever skill sets you have, you want to let them know why they would be helpful for them. You must ask questions in an interview. It should be a dialogue, so remember that. Be prepared to ask your interviewer questions about their firm, hiring needs, or practice areas. Be prepared to talk about anything that appears on your resume. We have a big interviewing section on the CP&P website with sample questions. Take a look at those. Some things you should not do in an interview. You all know this, but I will review it anyways. No profanity, no negative comments. If you left a job and you really hated the job or you got a bad grade from a class and you really disliked that professor and you felt he had it into you, don't say that in an interview. You do not want to come across negative. You want to come across positive. They're going to think you're going to say the same thing about them. So stay positive. Do not go negative for anything. And take ownership of anything that happened badly, like, for example, a bad grade. Do you have any questions? Yes. You have to have at least one or two. If they ask you for a question at the end, you should have a question. Some categories of questions that you may want to think about asking. The work or working conditions. What sort of cases will I be seeing? What type of training am I going to receive? Does an associate have an opportunity to specialize? If you're a litigator, When will I have advocacy and courtroom experience? Sometimes it's many, many years at large firms, as you know. Is there an emphasis of bringing in new business? Are they looking at you as a lateral to bring in business? They might be. Questions about training or your evaluation or promotions. How frequently and in what manner are attorneys evaluated? If I'm hired as a foreign associate, is there a good chance that I'll be hired as an associate after this year? I mean, what is the track record? You get asked them that. How do you get feedback after completing assignments? Common career development paths at that particular firm. Other types of questions are questions that ask for insight of the firm. How long have you been at this office? What do you like the best about it? Where do you see growth in your firm or organization? Some of these larger, like policy type of questions are good for partners. I mean, they may have a little bit more insight about like what is the growth of this particular firm. How would you describe the office culture? Firms have different cultures. I mean, you'll get this if you start talking to some of the other attorneys that have worked there. What is that particular office's vibe? Is it very, very serious? Is it more international? What are they sort of known for? Questions about the organization's hiring practices. Do specific departments extend offers to specific candidates? How many LLMs does the organization anticipate hiring? And how many LLMs does this firm typically hire in a given year? Good questions to ask, because sometimes you can't find these answers on the website. Questions that combine your knowledge of the organization with information you want to receive. I understand that the organization is involved in this litigation. How is that moving forward? So if you're looking at their website and seeing something interesting, like they just merged with another firm, these are interesting questions to ask them about. Behavioral questions again. Do not worry, I will be sending the PowerPoint and it will be recorded. So the behavioral questions, as I mentioned before, it's a style of interviewing where employers ask questions that call on candidates to provide examples of specific competencies or skills that are thought to be markers of a success by an employer. So tell me a time when you had limited time to complete a project and how did you handle the experience? This is always a good one. Tell me about a time that you made a mistake. How did you deal with it? Give me an example of a time that you were a leader on a team and how did you motivate the group? Tell me a time that you had to challenge a supervisor and how did you handle that? It's sort of tricky little questions that you have to think back to actual scenarios. And if you don't have a scenario, then you may have to tell them, well, that has not happened to me. However, in this situation, I would do this. There are questions that you really shouldn't ask. Stupid questions. Do not ask questions that reveal you've done no research into the organization or its location. I have had employers come to me and say, I interviewed this student of yours, really great student. However, she thought that we also handled real estate and our firm does not. So that was a complete fail for that interviewee. So you need to know enough about the firm that you're not going in blind. Minimize the direct questions about the numbers of hours you will be working, or whether weekend work will be required, and how much money you'll be making. You do not want to ask these questions ever to a firm, because they will assume that you aren't going to be wanting to work hard, and they're going to be assuming that they're going to not want to invest in you. You could get these type of answers, usually from other ways, by just talking to people, but you do not ask these questions in any interview, else they won't like you. Grades. Difficult issues sometimes. Take responsibility, don't be defeatist. If you received a grade in a class and you expected it to be higher, take ownership of it. So if you receive your grades and you received a B-, for example, take steps. So if you receive that on the 22nd, you want to contact your professor. I would like to set up a meeting to discuss my grade, to see what I did wrong so I could learn from it. If you had a bad grade in a certain class, but this is your practice area, you could say to the employer, yes, I'm actually quite surprised at that B- I received at that particular class. I've actually practiced this law for a significant period of time, and I feel that my knowledge of that area was not expressed in that performance of a 3-hour exam. So, or it was the first US exam I've had. I haven't taken an exam in 10 years, and I need to work on my exam taking skills. However, I do know this area of law. So you can compensate for that, but you have to accept responsibility. It cannot be, well, that professor was just terrible, or yada, yada, yada. You want to take ownership of it and move on. A lot of times students have a problem that if they have one bad grade, they get so worried about that particular grade, their entire interview revolves around it. You only have 20 minutes. You get in, get out. Don't dwell on that. Focus on the relevant, successful work experience. Emphasize trends. If you didn't do so well your first semester and you did better your second semester, showing an up tilt. Or I received a bad grade in that particular area. My focus is not really criminal law. It is actually corporate law. I took criminal law because I just am interested in it, but I didn't do so well in that class. That's okay, but you want to sort of showcase and move forward past that. If you don't have a geographic tie or certainty of practice area, that's sometimes a difficult issue. Then you want to show a commitment to the firm or the organization and to gaining experience in that practice area. Sometimes this is hard for individuals that have done a certain type of law and they're trying to shift to a different area of law. You just sort of have to build your case about why, how you're getting to be knowledgeable in that area. The 20-minute screening interviews, you probably are not going to use a hypothetical, but some employers do. So usually the hypotheticals are more, we see them a lot at like prosecutors' offices or public defenders' offices, that they will give you a hypothetical and then they'll ask you to answer it. What they're usually trying to figure out is your ability to think on your feet, and they're looking for good judgment and decisiveness, even if you may not know that area of law. You're probably not going to face that in this type of interview, but I just want to bring that up so that you know about them. Taking control of an interview. You need to know your strengths and be ready to communicate them to the employer. You're not tooting your own horn. Do not feel like you're uncomfortable about saying why you are an excellent attorney for this position. You have to think about what your strengths are, and you have to be able to project that to the employer. Don't feel that you're being arrogant or cocky. This is what an interview is about. They're comparing you to other people, so you need to showcase why you are special. Finishing, thank the interviewers for their time and their interest. Reiterate your interest in the organization. You could ask for a business card if they haven't offered one to you, so you have that. You end as you begin with a firm handshake. You can send a thank you note. You don't have to for the ISIP ones. For second interviews, you should send a thank you note, and just an email. It does not have to be a handwritten email. The thing about thank you notes, be sure you proofread them. It's better not to send one than to send one with grammatical errors, because that could be what's going to, we've had employers say, thought they were great, received the thank you note, it was completely not well written with grammatical errors, I don't want them anymore. So if you don't have the time to do a good job on a thank you note, don't send them. It's better to err on not sending it. But for a second interview, a thank you note is a nice touch. For this first interview, do not worry about it. The CPMP website section we have a whole section on interviewing skills, how to prepare, sample questions. It's all laid out there. We also have something called Interview Stream, which is an online mock interview program that you will be able to pick a set of questions. You're on a videotape, like on your computer, and it's back and forth with the imaginary person that's on the other side. So it's sort of a nice way, and you get to record yourself and then review it to see how you actually are looking in a mock interview. It's nice, especially for if you're going to be having a Skype interview with employers and you haven't done so many. It's sort of a nice way to see exactly how you look on the screen. So take advantage of that. If you have an attorney mentor, please contact them now to schedule a mock interview, because they're supposed to do that with you. And, sorry, this may be the wrong date. The mock interview program is next week on Wednesday. I'm trying to rearrange it for the some of it for the Wharton students because they have conflicts. So if you signed up for that, I will be matching you hopefully with a JD student or with an administrator to do a 20-minute mock interview and then have 10-minute feedback with you. So if you have not signed up for one and you guys want one, please let me know as well. Just email me because I'm trying to schedule that at this point. And that is pretty much it. Good luck. We will have a session just a question and answer session about ISIP on the Tuesday before ISIP. If anyone has any last minute questions, I've gone over most everything. One thing about ISIP that you should know is that the interviews are conducted in large rooms like this, so there's multiple tables. So it's not like you're in one room with just one employer. You may be in one room with one employer, and then you leave, come back, and the next employer is in that corner instead of this corner. So you just have to be aware of the surroundings. Can be very loud, and you have to sort of be able to focus intently on that particular person. Yes.
Are we expected to have business cards?
You are not expected to have business cards. If you want to order business cards, you certainly can, but there's no expectation that you have to have one. If you're collecting a business card from them, they already have your resume. You will be going to receptions. There's a reception at ISIP that night, and you may be invited to other receptions from various firms. Sometimes you're running from reception to reception, only staying a certain period of time. If you have been invited to receptions, I would advise having a business card, because you're going to want something, and it would be nice to be able to give them something back. And you could order them through Campus Copy has them.
If we do it this week, will we receive it in time?
I think so. I don't think it takes that long. You also can, Communications has in the past given, I'll see if I could ask them again, just the logo, and you could order them online as well. But I think the easiest is just going to Copy Center. They have like pictures of it. And we also have the link on the website just for the order form. It only takes a couple days, but I would probably order it sooner than later. What was your question?
For transcripts, do we need the post-learning transcripts as well?
If you have a copy, I would bring it. My view is it's better to be prepared. If they ask you for something, you don't want to have to say, I'll get back to you. It's much nicer to, and especially if you did very well in your first law degree grades, having a copy of that transcript in that packet of information that you give them, then you have everything that they might ask you for. I don't think everyone's going to ask, but some do. Any other questions? Yes.
If the interviews were scheduled by some local firms, will the interviews be conducted in English?
Will it conduct in English?
Yeah.
No. If it's usually if it's a local firm, at ISIP, it's conducted in the language of whatever the interviewer wants to conduct it in. So that's another thing, being careful with what you have on your resume about your fluency of certain languages. I've had more with JD students an issue that they say they're fluent in a certain language, and then they go to the interview, and the interviewer switches into Spanish or another language, and the student didn't really know that language very well. So, yes?
Update the resume or bring a different one?
Oh, you can bring an updated resume if you have one. It's not a problem. I mean, what you submitted to ISIP, if you have an updated resume and you want to share that with them, feel free to give them the updated resume. Especially if you've joined a new group, or you've received an honor, or you have something else in it, or completed a certificate. Yeah, sure, of course. Any other questions? Yes.
Like a resume like our own language?
You can. If you're interviewing with someone from another country or your own country, you may want to have your CV in your own language. Yeah. I really do feel very strongly just bring everything that you think you possibly would need, which is probably the resume and the CV, just so that you're not caught flat-footed. You don't want to be in a situation that they ask you for something and you don't have it. It's also nice to give them a manila folder for that particular firm with your materials, so that you have it all organized. You're not scrambling through your bag. It's just all neatly organized by firm, especially if you have a lot of back-to-back interviews. Also, in between the interviews, take some notes. Just jot some notes for yourself about that interview that you just completed, because by the end of the day, if you had multiple interviews, it really blurs. So I think if you have just like a few minutes in between to say, interview with this particular person, she was very interested in this. So if you do want to write a thank you note, or if you have a second interview, and they're like, oh, who did you interview with? You could say, I interviewed with Christine Madison, and we had a nice discussion about this. By the end of the day, they will blur. So I do think in between, just jot yourself some notes for yourself. The reception, ISIP has a reception on the top floor of the building that night. I believe it starts at 5 to 6. And then Penn Law has the reception at the Penn Club. That starts at, I think, 7 o'clock.
The one that has
Yes. Yeah. And that will be the class. It will be also, I invite the mentors. I invite people from that graduated last year that are still in New York or wherever they are. So it's every year it's a different mix of people. And also, if you have a significant other, or if you're married, you can bring your spouse or significant other. You just have to let me know the name of the person so I could do a name tag. We're not opening it up to friends because we have had in the past that people have just brought friends from other LLM programs that are not significant others. It's okay if this is significant others. It just gets to be too much. It's not that large of a room, and we can't accommodate that many people. But of course, if you are in a relationship with someone and you would like to bring them to it, do so. Also, I want to make it very clear that the reception that we're having, if you don't have an interview at ISIP, that's fine. You still should come to the reception because it's a fun party. And the Penn Club's really nice. So just come, whether or not you're coming to New York for the ISIP job fair. So, yes.
Is it a bad thing if we seem too ambitious in answering questions like, what do you see yourself in 5 years?
As long as you're not arrogant about it, if it is a realistic type of place that you would be in 5 years, like if you're thinking, in 5 years I would like to be on the partnership track at your firm, I'd like to be an expert in this particular area, I'd like to be a mentor for other students, I'd like to build a book of business in this particular area, of course. If you want to say, I want to be the CEO of this particular company, probably not in 5 years. So, I mean, if it's a realistic 5-year expectation, of course.
So we don't have to say the specific position?
No. You could say, I would like to be an expert in this area of law at that time. That's fine. Or I would like to publish in this particular area. I mean, whatever is a more realistic type of thing that you would be doing in 5 years. But of course, ambition is something that they're looking for. They want someone who's a go-getter. So that's not a problem, but you don't want to say something that is an unrealistic expectation that you would have in 5 years. Any other questions? And if you have any questions, I mean, it's not for a couple weeks. I just wanted to get you guys sort of early so that people sort of have an idea of what's going to be going on. And then the mock interview program, if you didn't sign up and if Wednesday doesn't work, you always can have a mock interview with myself or my colleagues at the CP&P office. You just have to sign up. You could get a half-hour slot and you could have a mock interview. It's not a problem. I was just trying to organize for next Wednesday something more with the JD students. So you get a little bit of a different perspective, and many of them have went through OCI, so they're very fresh with the questions, and they give you a little bit of a different view of the interview process than we do. So that's why. So if you haven't signed up for that, let me know. I could add you. But please let me know today or tomorrow because I'm trying to match people up. That's pretty much it. Please have more pizza if you'd like to have more pizza. And if you have any other questions, just let me know. I will end this thing.